This is Gordon Earl, and I want to welcome everyone to another episode of A Williams Life. For the first time, I have two guests on the program, Will Parish and Perk Perkins, and we'll focus on a powerful theme, which is friendship. I believe it's fair to say that many in our class place a high value on the close and enduring ties that we have with our fellow classmates, which have survived, even flourished, for more than 50 years. In the case of Will and Perk, they became roommates junior year and have done many extraordinary things to maintain their intense bond over the past 5 decades. We'll explore a number of these endeavors, but start with an amazing trip they embarked on following graduation that took them around the world for almost 2 years. We'll then move on to their lives today, with Will deeply involved in causes that blend education and improving literacy about the environment to students throughout California. And Perk's experience running Orvis, a family-owned business specializing in fly fishing, hunting, and sporting goods, previously run by his father. Will and Perk, thanks for joining us. To begin, I want both of you to take us through your journey after graduation, and it was an amazing journey. It lasted 20 months, you crossed 5 oceans and seas, and you explored 35 countries, but it all began at Williams. So tell us how you met and your first impressions of each other.
Well, I remember freshman year walking over to the Bronfman Science Center, and there was a guy walking over in bare feet, and it had just snowed. And I thought, well, there's an unusual guy who loves the out of doors like I do, probably more than I do, judging from his footwear. And so we sought each other out right after that gathering, freshman days or whatever it was.
And Perk, your impression?
I remember Will was just a real go-for-it guy. Kind of can-do, let's go for it, let's go. And I had that impression just from bumping into him a few times. Then I heard he was a pilot. I said, that's cool. And, we kind of jumped into a roommate situation our junior year because Josh Raymond had left for a semester abroad or something, and your roommate had ditched you, I think.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
So how and when did the idea for this grand trip originate?
Well, we sort of had an epiphany, an aha moment in a conversation that we were having while we were decorating our room, thinking, well, what do I want to do after college? And we both wanted to travel around the world in some way. And Perk had been thinking about it in more detail than me. He'll go into that. And I had just started thinking about it. I was a pilot. I thought it would be really cool to involve that in some way of getting around the world like my great uncle did in 1937. He was the first to fly a float plane around the world. And we just got to talking, and it unfolded from there.
Well, I can give Williams credit for my side of it because I did a freshman study, or whatever, January term, an outward bound program in Colorado, winter mountaineering. And one of the guys that I met on that trip really impressed me in a lot of ways. And one way was he had just finished a trip where he had hitchhiked around the world. It had taken him like a year and a half. And that inspired me. So I came back from winter study with that notion in my head.
So you're starting to plan this thing, and I'm just wondering what your hopes and your expectations were starting out. What was going through your mind?
The biggest possible amazing trip that National Geographic would not only sponsor, but would publish a cover story on. I got excited about doing the trip with Perk in a Queen Air, and started researching on the cost of a Queen Air and putting a budget together that we presented to National Geographic. And we got all the way down to Washington and met with Gil Grosvenor. And he said, sorry, it's a little over our budget for 2 people who don't have any journalistic experience at all. So then we thought there are other sources, so we pitched Jeep. And we pitched Pepsi. We said, hey, we'd paint this Jeep in the shape of a Pepsi can and drive it all around. And then there was the Watson Fellowship was our last try.
Yeah, I'd applied for the Watson Fellowship. Almost got it. And that was so our budget shrank dramatically after that was sort of our last try. And then we turned to our piggy banks.
What did your families think of you're embarking around the world in a Jeep.
Yeah, I was very surprised that my parents were so supportive. And so I ran with it. Once I got the green light from them, I never asked again.
And both my parents were the same way. They were very enthusiastic about what we would learn on the trip and just having the initiative to put it all together and do it.
So let's talk about the trip right now. And it was an amazing trip. And here we are 50 years later, and I'm wondering, what memories do you have today that are most prominent, that most influence your lives? We can't cover everything because there are literally hundreds of memories, but what ones would you like to talk about today?
Well, I don't have a single memory that stands out, but I have lots of them that string together into sort of one common thing. And the image I have is our kind of pulling into a little village or town and stopping someone, pulling over and stopping and talking to someone on the dirt road. You know, maybe they had a dog or were walking their kid, and just getting into a conversation. And that conversation leading to, come over for dinner tonight, or I'm heading out of town to my father's house. Would you like to come with us? I think he'd like to meet you. That's all those memories that collected were really just engaging with people on just a very basic human level and having it turning into a relationship. In some cases that lasted a day, and some cases that has lasted 50 years.
I would echo that same sentiment also. And then there was a whole nother side of it, which was the trip required a lot of preparation. We put 2 years into planning it, collecting names from our parents and whatnot all around the world. And we made a plan. And so the challenge became, do we stick to the plan or do we be spontaneous? And always being on that idea of, well, we want to plan, we want to complete the plan of traveling around the world, but not at the expense of what we might encounter in the trip itself, and having opportunities to delve into the moment and be spontaneous. The other thing I learned was the importance of having a plan B. If one plan wasn't working out, to have an alternative in mind or create one on the run. And those have been good life lessons for me all along.
So give us an example of a plan B.
So we were driving, and we thought we might be able to drive across the Darien Straits from Central America to South America, and got to Panama, and that certainly wasn't the case. So we thought, well, let's get on a cargo ship, and we went to all of the cargo shipping companies in Panama and in Cologne that we could find, and they were all way over our budget. And so we were sort of twiddling our thumbs, and a guy came up and started talking about this, and he said, well, I've just jumped on a converted logging ship that's going to take our cars across to Buenaventura, Colombia. And we said, oh my gosh, can we get on that? I don't know, he said. So we drove down to the port where that bucket of bolts and steel plates stood, and begged our way onto it. And the cargo net picked up the Jeep, put it on the boat, and we paid our less than 1/3 cost. But we didn't have enough food, so we had to run over to the local. Believe it or not, there was a Dairy Queen, and we got 3 days. We bought 3 days worth of milkshakes and hamburgers for the passage, because we'd just be camping out next to the Jeep. There wasn't any accommodation for us. So we had 17 nationalities on that ship, and made the voyage and got over to Colombia.
So let me, along those lines, again, there are too many stories to tell, but there were many highs and there were many lows. And tell us separately a high moment and a low moment.
I have one sort of related to the travails of traveling. Before we left on the trip, we set a winch up on the front of the Jeep, just in case. Sure enough, driving down 1,000 miles of dirt roads in Guatemala, a huge truck came over the brink of a hill on our side of the road, completely unable to get over to his side of the road. And so we had to shift and drive off the road. Well, there was a steep cliff on that side of the road. and the Jeep caught the wheel on the side and was headed down the steep angle with obviously Perk and me in the car, but stopped by leaning up against a tree. And we were leaning so far over against the wheel door, and I couldn't get out that side. I was the passenger. And so we got out the other side and then gingerly pulled out the winch and tied it to a tree, or I guess it was a telephone pole actually, further up, and winched the Jeep out of danger. And that was such a feeling of, oh my God, the whole trip could have ended there. That was an incredibly happy moment. So pulling us out of danger was...
And if that tree hadn't been there, you were over the cliff?
Yep. Yeah, it wasn't like a cliff, 1,000 feet down. It was...
Jeep would have rolled, though.
Yeah,
it rolled over and over.
It was a very steep cliff, and there were little saplings of trees. So it would have been the end of the trip, and who knows how we would have been injured.
Will, you have a moment, I'm sorry, Perk, do you have a moment, high or low, whatever you choose to recollect?
Well, I'll hit the low real quickly. It was about 16 months into the trip. We had these mail drops, and we'd get about every month and a half or so. We'd pull into a city, and we'd arrange for someone to collect our mail, and opened a letter from my dad, and it, in fairly terse text, said, "If you still want that job at Orvis, be here in July." That was kind of a bummer. That was a buzzkill. I'll roll right into one of my high points, which was Willie and I had split up for a month or so because I wanted to go into Argentina because it's so famous for its great trout fishing. And Will can tell you why he didn't want to go to Argentina at the time. So I headed off hitchhiking and buses and stuff, and I ended up down near in the glacier area, Moreno Glacier of Argentina. And I don't even remember how it happened, but I remember walking into a farmyard and meeting a young woman and talking. And the next thing I know, she'd offered me her horse. And I mounted the horse and I set off riding across the Pampas, looking at these beautiful glaciers, and came back at the end of the day. It was almost dark. Gave this young woman her horse back, and it was just such a cool day. And I, why she trusted me with her horse, or even felt like sharing it with me, was amazing. Because I literally walked into her yard, got on the horse, came back, and gave her the horse back, and was on my way. And it was just in my mind, I can just always remember the colors of the grasses on the pampas and the glacial lakes and the glaciers calving into them. It was incredible day.
Did you get a taste of anti-American feeling on your trip as a result of the color of your Jeep? And it was obvious that you were Americans. I mean, did you encounter some resistance or any hostility?
That was kind of the amazing thing, Gordon. We encountered virtually no hostility. And in fact, I became a strong patriotic soul of the United States because everybody wanted to go to the United States and live the Horatio Alger's dream. And the closest we came to some sort of resistance might have been in Iran when the Shah was still in power and clearly aligned with the United States. But there was a lot of sentiment that ultimately led to his overthrow just a couple of years later. But it didn't affect us personally.
Now that you're talking about Iran, and I'm thinking about countries like Afghanistan, where there's been so much war and devastation in recent years, and the U.S. has played a role in that. And I'm wondering, when you focus on those kinds of countries now, what your impressions were at the time, and then you reflect on everything that's happened since.
We went through Afghanistan fairly quickly at the time. It was not a really safe country, and I think we were also in a hurry to get to, Kabul on the far side of the country in time for the holiday breaks, the Christmas holiday. And there was the one country where I kind of felt like I was prey, that, we weren't taking our time, we weren't making the connections, and I really felt that people saw that we were obviously of means because of the Jeep, and felt very defensive the whole time. I remember one time I was negotiating with a street merchant for something I was going to give Will for Christmas, and I decided I'd stand my ground on my price, and damn if the guy didn't pull a knife on me. And Will didn't get that present.
Yeah.
Let me talk about invincibility. You're young men, and many young men and women think of themselves as invincible. And I know at the beginning of the trip, Will, you almost drowned in Wyoming. And I know the Perk, you were seriously ill several times and had a bout of typhoid fever. And I'm wondering if these experiences led you to question your own mortality, or led to a certain loss of innocence, or those kinds of things, or did you experience those moments and say, I'm going to live forever?
Well, you sent these questions to us ahead of time, and I had to think about that one quite a bit. And I mustered all the humbleness I could. And in all honesty, I came back more invincible at the end of the trip than I'd left. Misplaced, of course, but and Will?
I also had that reaction. At age 23, all those incidents made me feel more immortal, not just immortal. So, if you think, I almost drowned in the Snake River, and I was grasping onto the snag in the river, and the Snake River's steely teeth were hissing around me, trying to pull me under. My buddy was safe on the shore, yelling, "You can do it, Will." And I had no idea that I, in fact, was in any danger until I started to try to pull myself out. And then the adrenaline hit, and I got out of the river okay. And was grateful for that and excited and thought, well, yeah, bring on some more challenges. And then Perk got sick. I had to turn the Jeep into an ambulance, and we drove through the streets of Quito at 60 miles an hour, and that was really great fun as well. So the loss of innocence, though, yes, like I mentioned about Afghanistan, looking back, walking through the favelas of Sao Paulo, seeing actual dead bodies on the side of sidewalks in Mumbai, then Bombay, just woke me up to how rough life is for so many people around the world, especially compared to our lives.
Yeah, again, a wonderful life lesson, and we'll get to the life lessons a little later, but that's a great one. Well, let's talk about something you've also mentioned earlier, and I was putting it in the theme of social media, which is today, it's the theme of humanity, but today we get so much communication that sometimes we think of the world, and at least I know I do, as a sort of a cruel, unforgiving place with a lot of bad actors, but I don't think that was your impression of the world then or now. So I wanted you to give us your impression of humanity as you experience it on your trip, and maybe your feelings about it today.
Well, we were blessed with many wonderful friendships and relationships the whole way. And when we engaged with people, and it could be anything from talking about sports, the weather, food, but when we engaged with people, and avoided sort of that transactional, hey, we're looking for, the Taj Mahal, which way to the Taj Mahal or something like that. When we engaged, I don't know that I can ever remember a bad experience. As long as we took the time to kind of connect with people on just a really basic human level. And on the other hand, if we were transactional about it, hey, we're in a hurry, we're going to do this, where's the gas station, something like that. That was more likely when we encountered sort of the dark side of humanity. And there were some of those too. But I must say, for me, it's been work the rest of my life to remain, or to try to avoid the transactional relationships, and to engage on a basic human level with people before I get into the transactions. But it's certainly a lesson I took away from the trip.
Can I tell a little story about that? Because
sure,
mine was the same way. We got to Ankara, Turkey and went to the embassy and were warned about getting off the main roads. And Perk and I looked at each other and said, but that's the whole point of this trip. And so we got off onto a tertiary road and stopped off in a camping area and noticed all these buses with holes in their windows. And we asked one of the bus drivers, well, what are the holes in the windows? And they said, oh, you don't want to go through any of those villages because the kids will throw rocks through your windows. And he said, it doesn't matter how fast you go, you can't go fast enough. So Perk and I pondered that and thought, well, maybe the deal is to go slow. So we went off. We'd heard about, Perk did all this great research around the world and always found odd, wonderful things to visit. And there were some series of Easter Island-size heads way up on the top of a mountain in this back country of Turkey called Nemrut Dagi. And so we set out to find it. And we had to not only get on tertiary roads, but dirt roads. And whenever we saw a village coming up, we slowed way down. And sure enough, kids popped up their head over the rocks where they'd been hiding behind with rocks in their hand. And I held out my hand, and we always carried around with us little bakshishes, little gifts. The Jeep had no top, and the doors were off, and I leaned, holding on to the roll bar, leaning out, yelling, merhaba, merhaba, which is hello in Turkish. And the kids were so astonished. They dropped their rocks and they came running around, and I would toss little candies out to them, knowing that we would have to come back down this road on our way back from Turkey. And we wanted to make all the friends we could. But it's
interesting because even that one word, and I'm sure you made a difference, because if you had raced through or if you hadn't said anything, but that one word, it indicated some level of friendship, I would think.
Well, yes, and it happened all over. So we didn't make our route. We didn't get to our goal that night, and we knew we shouldn't be camping out at night because of the Kurdish. I don't want to blame the Kurdish, but there was a lot of unrest, in the countryside. And so as it was getting dark, as luck would have it, we saw a military outpost. And so we pulled in, and everybody in the military outpost is very curious about what this muddy red Jeep was up to.
At first they wanted us to go away. Remember? They were sending us away.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah. Somehow we ingratiated ourselves to at least get in, and then we had the idea, let's pull out the Frisbee. So Perk and I pulled out the Frisbee, started playing catch with each other, and everybody dropped what they were doing, saying, what is that? And one guy took the Frisbee and tried to throw it like a baseball, and we taught people how to throw the Frisbee, and lucky for us, the captain of the gendarme was the best at it. And so we gave him the means of reestablishing his status as being, the captain of the place. And we were invited to come in. We had dinner with him in his quarters. They put us up in the hospital. We had some, not that comfortable beds, but beds in the hospital. And then we took off the next day and finished the trip, got up to these huge statues and took wonderful pictures. Perk took the wonderful pictures, and then came back down. And as we were coming back down, we stopped in and thanked the gendarme, and we came back down through the little villages and waved to everybody, and they waved to us. And it was a wonderful feeling of friendship that we had experienced.
A single word and a Frisbee makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. I wondered about the major lessons that you learned from the trip, and you've alluded to some of them so far. Mm-hmm. But if you had to encapsulate, this is what I learned, what would you both say?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would have 3 plans for it, 3 words for it, which are dream, plan, and do. That's what we learned, both in creating the trip and then every day on the trip, having an idea and then putting a plan around how to implementing it and then executing. Approaching life, relationships, situations with a yes and attitude rather than the yes but attitude has been something that I've lived with. Spending time and deepening friendships. My friendship with Perk on that trip was a grounding experience. We had this grounding effect on each other to bring us back to our truths of what is the trip about. The other final thing is the trust in people never failed us. We left the Jeep with strangers and came back and it was fine. The Jeep itself had no locks on the doors. It was a canvas-covered vehicle, and we were free from theft, and all the hospitality that we received around the world was genuinely given to us, not in hopes for an exchange, just out of friendship, and that was amazing to experience.
Perk?
The sort of the can-do look at life was probably, I mean, I had it at Williams. We had it obviously to pursue this idea of this trip, but I'd say that was definitely cemented in me afterwards, and changed my life there. I mean, I can't think of many challenges that I ever shrank from afterwards, and so there was a confidence not so much in my ability to succeed as much as my ability to tackle something. One example, Gordon, was I grew up in Ohio and Vermont and had very little experience other than being with friends on the water, but the little bit of time I'd had on the water gave me a view that I loved it. I loved waking up on the ocean, going to sleep, watching the sun go down on the ocean. And so at like age 50, I said, I want to learn to sail, and I want to spend a year at sea. And so I did that in the middle of my career too, which was kind of challenging with my board of directors and things. But again, it was sort of like, you can do this, put your mind to it, dream, plan, do. And so that was a good example.
Well, I was watching him from afar. It took years for him to develop the skills to be able to take on a catamaran and sail it all around the islands in the Caribbean.
That's right. I did it by myself too, with my dog. Yeah.
It was amazing.
Did you get a note from your dad saying, if you're not back by July 1st, you don't have a job? Or
actually, my boat sank, so he didn't have to send me that note.
I'm going to be coming back. Well, let's segue to something that's, again, related to all this, and I found personally amazing, which is the annual retreats that you do. And you've been doing them for decades, and it made me reflect on my own friendships, that I don't do something like this and maybe wish that I had. So I'll just tee it up to say that you, for decades, have been getting together for these annual retreats, and you look at ways to explore and even further develop your already deep friendship, right? So tell us what takes place during the retreats and what you get out of them.
Shortly after the trip and the 10 years that Perk and I casually, individually talked about other people about the trip, we both came away realizing, wow, this is a bigger deal than we really thought it was. And some of the stories started slipping away, and Perk and I spoke about some of the things that we learned, and we realized, oh my God, we don't want this trip to slip away. So in 1986, we had our first meeting where the reflections on the trip was the main reason for getting together for a 3-day retreat. From that time forward, we developed this idea of let's be this grounding influence for each other. Let's check in with each other on how we're doing on all of these different goals of ourselves. And it wasn't any kind of Perk never set a goal for me nor I for him, but it was, how are you doing as a father? How are you doing in your career? How are you doing as a community member? What are you doing for your spiritual life? What about self-care? What books are you reading that are influencing your thinking? What concerns do you have on the political scene, right? Whatever sorts of things. And as we went through the years, we would always bring the journals along and read each other stories that we had written in our journals, because we each wrote over 1,000 pages of journal entries. And at about, 20 or 25 or 30 of those, we decided to write the book and memorialize our thinking.
So you continue, obviously, to learn from the trip. Continue to this day. I mean, it took place 50 years ago, and you're still reminiscing, reading your journal entries, and taking lessons from the trip.
Mm-hmm. We're doing that, though. Over the years, the journal reading has sort of ebbed. That's not as much a feature of our annual retreats as our really sort of checking in with our lives and, asking some hard questions. Like a few years ago, both of our dads were coming toward the ends of their lives, and, we weren't spending as much time reading our journals as we were saying, what's your relationship with your father mean to you? What is it you want to be sure you've said to him, before he passes away? What do you want to do with him? What do you want to talk about? Have we done 36 of these now? Something?
Yeah.
Yeah. But over the period of time, the content has shifted from the first one, which was almost entirely journal reading, to lately it's a lot more about reflective on where you are in your life and what you want to make sure you've done and who you've connected with.
Well, it's important to note too that we agree on what the agenda is for the big topics to talk about, and then we take notes, and so we have elaborate notes going back 36 years that we can look back at and evaluate sort of where we are today with where we thought we would be looking forward. Because a central feature of these retreats are the 1-year plan, the 5-year projection, and the 10-year outlook. So we can go back and see what we were thinking way back then.
So do you hit your marks when you look at what you said you wanted to do in 5 or 10 years, and then you look back? Did you mostly hit those marks?
No, I think we bat about 50% probably. Yeah, we do. There is a to-do list.
500 is a good batting average.
It is pretty good. Yeah,
it'll get you into the Hall of Fame.
But we do follow up with each other, and actually we have some mid-year calls too on things that might be a little more urgent. We can't wait till next year to find out if it got done. But we do pretty well, I'd say.
Well, then there was an idea that came about, which was, we don't have enough spontaneous interaction. Me living in California, Perk living in Vermont or back then. And so he conceived of this idea of joy moments, where if we were having a moment of exhilaration, and if I do, and Perk happened to flash into my mind, I would send him a text with a photo and saying, I'm having a joy moment, and like one sentence what it was. And that's really been fun to do, because we could get quick little bursts of window of sights into each other's lives that way.
Yeah, these annual the retreats that really followed from the trip. I would put more value on those than I would the actual trip. They followed on the trip, but they've been so rich, and we've covered a lot of things that you might otherwise kind of pass over.
Well, I want to credit Perk with one thing, realizing that it wouldn't have been enough, I don't think, just to get together for the sole purpose of doing a deep dive. That's pretty intense. So we always and to this day, continue to build these retreats around a project. And it was saltwater fly fishing for many, many years in the beginning. And so we would have, something we would do, and then we would reflect and talk and think, and then something we would do and come back to it. So there were airing times in between that really helped processing and helped the fun of it.
So you've talked about your fathers, and I want to go there for a second, starting at the beginning. And they both went to Williams. My father went to Williams as well. And I wondered if even at a young age, you thought consciously or unconsciously you were following in their footsteps.
I did not. And in fact, it was almost, I was, it was, at the time, I think a lot of us thought the same way. It was kind of the last thing I wanted to do was to follow in my father's footsteps. I wanted to, carve my own path out of things. But I did end up going to the same college that he did. But the similarity ended there. His college experience was vastly different than ours. And I really never thought much about his college experience the whole time.
So my dad was an athlete at Williams, and I was an athlete. And I had that connection with him. And he was a trustee during the whole time I was a student. And I thought about him in terms of, being one of the trustees of the college. But the what he did with his life was so vastly different than anything I could imagine. And so while I was inspired, we can get into this more if you like, but by his model of how to live a life full of integrity, that's what I really took away.
I want to talk a little bit more about your what I call larger-than-life father, but, Will, I have something for you because it brings us together in this respect. My father went to Williams. He left after his freshman year to become a B-17 pilot in Europe. He flew 50 missions, and I am to this day in awe of that, especially just watching Masters of the Air, and the casualty rate of 75%, who flew B-17s. I've been to Foggia, Italy, where he flew his missions out of. I've read his letters to my mother, blah, blah, blah. The point is, your father was a decorated World War II veteran, and I'm wondering if the experience that I have when I resonate to my father, do you resonate to your father in the same way, given his war experience?
I so wanted to be like my dad. And everything I did in my life, I wanted him to approve of. I couldn't think of living a life that had more purpose and meaning and integrity than my father. Yeah, he was my hero well into my 50s, an ongoing thing. And when the Vietnam War came around, and I thought, oh, my God, do I have to go try to become a decorated military man also? And we had a conversation, and he did not want me to go to that war. He had, probably like your father, graduated college, Williams, and enlisted in 41, and survived Guadalcanal, survived Peleliu, and that's where he got his Bronze Star. And I felt like I could never live up to his expectations.
Yeah, we probably share that to some degree in common. Perk, I don't know whether your father served in the war or whether you have a similar experience as it relates to your father in war. I don't know the answer to that.
No, I don't. He did not serve in war. And as you know, I did end up following him into the family business. My concept when I was in my senior year at Williams was I was going to become a lawyer, become a crack commercial real estate lawyer, and then turn that into conservation law, land protection. And I'm tremendously inspired by the likes of Tom Jorling into that. And it was my father was a very active conservationist throughout his business career. And he admired my desire to become an environmental lawyer. Thought it was a good path. But he did say, he said, I often feel that I can do more as a sponsor and supporter of conservation causes through our business than I could be if I was the actual practitioner, in the trenches. And I observed him over a couple of years, and I admired how much he and the company was able to do to, provide in some cases the funds for something to get done, and then in other cases to give it the visibility through our communications. And that was a huge influence, and that really is what helped me make my decision to enter the family business rather than pursue the environmental law. And the other thing I was a really, 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 really slow reader, and once I realized how much lawyers had to read, I knew I could never hack it.
Okay, so it's sort of, Will, what little I know about your family background, it's a little bit of the inverse. You just talked about your father being a hero and how much you loved and respected and admired him, but then you didn't go work for the same company where you had that opportunity. You took a different path. And explain that to me.
I think it really started with my father and my mother saying during my summer times, let's have you have exposure and experiences that you wouldn't normally have in Gull Lake outside Kalamazoo, Michigan. So they were always pushing me to think in terms of, well, what else can I do? How can I push myself? How can I extend further? And it sort of seemed like a path too well laid out for me if I wanted to work for the company. My dad did say if you want to work for the company, you need to bring a formal degree with it, with your application. And so I did go to law school. And sort of like Perk, I found out that there's so many ways of being involved in something bigger than yourself, something that can have a big influence, that I really looked to my dad to say, I don't really want to keep being a lawyer. I want to start an alternative energy company that will show you can produce massive amounts of electricity without using fossil fuels. And he was always supportive of every shift and turn that I took through my career.
Do you think he would have preferred that you join the family company? Would that have made him happier, or he was just as happy for you to find your own path?
Definitely happier that I found my own path. But it took me a long time to realize that what he really wanted was for me to pursue the areas that I felt passionate about and could make a difference in. He was very admiring. As a matter of fact, he became chairman of that alternative energy company, which was a great
So
joy
you did have the connection on the business side.
Exactly, yeah.
Perk, did he strongly encourage you to become part of Orvis? Did he leave it up to you? How did you make that decision?
Interesting. He was, when I sort of felt my father's pressure, I would say I felt it much more in attending Williams than I did joining the family business. I think he liked my alternative path of taking a legal path into, environmental causes. But he was delighted, and he really didn't have an heir sort of to his position in the company, and I ended up filling a lot of holes that that no one else, that he hadn't hired anyone else to fill. So I think.
Did you feel as though he was sort of looking over your shoulder the whole time, or did he let you run the company as you saw fit?
Interestingly, early on, I did not feel that at all. And then later on, after I'd sort of proven myself, I did feel he was looking over my shoulder all the time.
Oh, okay. But you made peace with that.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Okay, let me talk a little bit more about fathers and sons, but more in what I'd call passionate pursuits. Because, Perk, as you've said, you're an avid conservationist, outdoorsman. Will, you're a pilot. And these were passions that your father shared. And I'm wondering whether, the father-son relationship, whether they encouraged this or were you inspired by their example?
I would say really both in my case. I was particularly inspired by learning the different ways that one could make a difference in the field of environmental activism or conservation law. One thing that my father did not engage in when he was running the business and an active conservationist, he didn't engage in any activism. In the last 20 years, Orvis has become quite an activist role in our conservation practices. And one of the things that I think he missed out on that I learned along the way is that a lot of the decision makers in Washington, D.C., they're tired of they know what the nonprofits are going to say to them. The practitioners are going to come and they know exactly where they're coming from, what they're going to say, and it's hardly worth spending any time with them. But when they bring someone from a profession or a business who can speak to why that cause is either deleterious or beneficial to their business, it makes a huge difference. I remember going down and lobbying for the replumbing of the Everglades south of Lake Okeechobee, and this was in Tallahassee, and the elected officials there were astonished that I had come down from Vermont to talk about the value of the Everglades to our customers and our business. And it made a far bigger impression on them than had sort of the professionals in the case of the two other nonprofits were Captains for Clean Water and the Everglades Foundation. So I was inspired, but I by his methods, which then sort of led to new methods.
You know, the other thing I would imagine, and have done a little bit of lobbying on my own, is that where there's an intersection of lobbying with government officials who shoot, who fly fish, and have the same passions you do. So you're talking to them on a business level, but you also have that common interest, and I would think that would make a difference.
It does, but have you run into this, Gordon? They use it to their advantage because you're going in there to make a pitch on something, right?
Right.
And they get you off on fly fishing, and pretty soon it's like, oh, I got to run to a meeting, and you never got your pitch in.
Oh, okay. Good point. Good point. Will, any comments on your friend's comments?
Oh, I was always envious of the capacity of Perk to have a job that was like bullseye centered with his passion. And the fact that he followed his father's zest for life and the ability to combine that with a job and not only make a great living at it, but to influence thousands, millions of people to get out and experience nature in a productive, positive, health-inducing way. I was always very proud and admiring of that.
Well, there's a third person on this broadcast who's been jealous of Perk for 50 years. And that's me. But I also think you did the same thing, Will. I mean, you followed your passions too. I know how much you care about, your role in education, your role in environmental literacy. So you followed a path that really turned you on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking back about, how I got on that path, and it was very much because of the way my father conducted his work life and his flying life. While I'm not actually a pilot, I did use my pilot credentials to work for an organization that uses airplanes to educate people from the bird's eye perspective on what's happening on the ground. It's called Lighthawk, and is a wonderful means of getting information into the hands of journalists and decision makers to help them make better environmental decisions. So I used my flying in that sense. But Dad would always say, don't complain, find a solution, and so that was part of the reason that I did that kind of flying. And then as I kept moving upstream to try to find those solutions, age 49, it dawned on me that the one area I hadn't looked at was education. And so I became a school teacher and started the environmental science program at a public school in San Francisco and built that out, and then also taught civics. And that really launched my last 20-some years on this education path about, using the public schools to prioritize something that every kid is interested in now, climate change education, and to make it part of the DNA of kids throughout California, all 6 million of them, to have this idea that, we're not separate from nature. We're connected to nature. And how can everybody sort of live a life with that in mind and make choices and support policies that can minimize the human impact on the environment. And I think with an educated population, we can make a lot of headway that we're beginning to see.
So that takes me back to Williams in a way and the environment, because as you know, Williams, as well as other colleges and universities, are really trying to develop programs and develop leadership in the area of the environment and sustainability. So I wanted you to think about colleges and universities and young people and what role you think they can play. And you've touched on it, Will, to help solve this climate problem. But think of it through the prism of colleges and universities and teaching. What role colleges and universities can play in this area? What do you think?
I think an important role for Williams College and the educators to play in this is to show the breadth of of this pathways to solutions, and not just settle on policy, which can be such a victim to politics, but to teach how market forces have and can make a difference, and right down to the grassroots operations. There's this great example of the group of Montana kids from age 5 to 22, who just won a court case in Montana with their court there on that goes right to the state constitution on how to really prevent additional coal and fossil fuel development in the pursuit of protecting against climate change.
Okay, we have now set the scene for you. You're in an auditorium, and in the audience are hundreds of young leaders in the environment and sustainability, and both you and Perk are on the stage, and you have a single thought to deliver to this next generation of leaders. What would you tell them?
Oh, I'd take a maybe a unexpected approach and talk to them about integrity. That you can be there are great leaders in the world, and they lead in opposite directions, and they sometimes lead in directions they may not even have intended to go. And they have teams around them, and the role of integrity with leaders is crucial. And I think a lot of people get so bent on a goal that maybe the integrity falls by the wayside. So I tried to come up with some pithy things to say about integrity.
Well,
I would focus in on moving away from how can I be the leader to how can we lead in a way that others will follow and create a movement that actually moves the needle in the way that we relate to the environment. If you count up the number of actual leadership positions of CEOs and assembly members and mayors and senators and whatever, there just aren't that many slots. So I would talk about the many ways of being a leader. And you can be a leader in showing how it's really great to share the limelight, to share the energy, to be involved with other people working on a similar mission. And it doesn't have to be about, I'm going to be the leader at all. And that, if we can kind of peel away a little bit of the ego orientation about, follow me, and rather decide and teach about ways that people need to be good followers as well. Good followers meaning choosing to support the leader that they wish perhaps that they could be, that they aren't for whatever reason, but putting their energies behind, in this respect, the climate actions that have that long-term impact to pull us back from the brink.
Well, whatever we do, we have to do it together.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we have covered a lot of ground, from your trip to Williams, to your lives, to the retreats, to many things. Are there any closing thoughts you'd like to leave for our listeners on these or other subjects?
Well, yeah, I had a thought along those lines. When I look at what I've done since college, through my careers, and what I really feel good about, you might even say accomplishments, there are two, and they both are around relationships. I prize above almost anything else the friendship and relationship that Will and I have developed and enjoyed all these years. Would put that above so many other things in my life. And the other one, very similar, is I worked side by side with my brother, David, for 40 years at Orvis. And
who joined you on your trip?
He did, yeah. Anyway, one of my biggest business points of pride is that he and I worked side by side. We ran the business successfully, and we are still great friends. He called me today. He wanted to know how I was doing and when I was going to sort of finish up with my radiation treatment here in Salt Lake City and when we could get out fishing again. And I think there are very few people who can talk about having a relationship that long, working relationship, and as well as a friend relationship with a family member in a family business. So those are, I'm not the first one to say that it all comes down to relationships, but I can feel it poignantly myself.
Will?
I'll tee off of, as I do so much with Perk, something that he just said, which was the relationship aspect. Throughout my career, I've learned that it's not about the transaction. It's about the relationship. And that idea of developing relationships first and transactions second has been a key to the success that I've enjoyed on all different sorts of levels and the different careers that I've engaged in, and particularly in the one that we're in now. The relationship and the commitment to maintaining a deep, deep friendship like the one that Perk and I have is so important in my life as well. And we have helped each other through so many different aspects of our life. And it's my relationship with Perk that is, the firmest sort of grounding relationship that outside my marriage that I have. So thank you.
Well, yeah, man.
Well, I'll tell you that I am in awe of your relationship and what you've done to protect it and enhance it. And it's also been a joy to have known you both somewhat at Williams, but in these and other episodes to get to know you again. And I thank you for that. And I thank you for participating. And I hope to see you in person very soon, maybe even at reunion.
I think so. You can count on it.
I want to thank Will and Perk for joining us today. And I want to thank all of you for listening in. I also want to remind everyone that you can see photos and listen to this and other episodes of A Williams Life on our website, 75creates.com. Until next time, this is Gordon Earl. Thanks for tuning in.